Braxcast time once again, guys. This is the 73rd episode of the Braxcast. This is going to be a pretty exciting episode because we've got the launch of the Rippaverse Primeval toy line with an Isom action figure made in collaboration with Mcfarlane Toys. But before we get into talking about that news, we did also get some pretty exciting cover reveals. So the first one is for the Black Eyed Club. Of course, I talked about Michael Copper and Lilian Renashi on last week's episode of the Braxcast, and I was speculating that their books could be the one up next for pre-order, and with the fact that we have these two cover reveals lends a bit more credence to this narrative. Of course, I don't believe we got the cover artists for these books. They're still being a bit hush-hush about the artists and all those details as well, but I'm sure we'll find out when their respective collections launch, and they might even launch in tandem with each other. And that would be really cool if they launch in tandem sometime this month and they fulfilled in October. That would be the preferable thing, considering the horror theme. And then we had Blood Booth #2 launching in October to really cap off the spooky season. I think that would be the fantastic thing to do. We'll see if that happens, but this is a really cool cover of the Black Eyed Club. We do get some insights of, I guess, characters that are in the Black Eyed Club, what they look like. We just don't know their names. It's still being, like I said, very vague. We do not have a lot of information about the Black Eyed Club, but it's cool to see that showing off in the cover. Now we've got this color for the Cursed, and this is a really epic one. You guys can see here, maybe not the best, but definitely leaning into the Japanese horror, like the Saskas we're talking about on the Q&A. I covered on a live stream yesterday. So since Nashi is a Japanese character, of course, our story is going to be focused in Japan. I'm going to focus on Japanese horror. There's definitely a lot you can draw from when you have that as a topic. So it's going to be really interesting to see what East Asia is like in the Rippaverse. That's definitely going to be a very interesting thing. And then, of course, learning more about the backstory of Helene is going to be really cool as well, figuring out who all these characters are and how that story is going to collide with Michael Copper's is as well, because I think both of these books are going to give us insight into how Michael and Lillian meet, why they want to work together, and what they're working towards. But of course, that's just a bit of speculation on my end. But now to get into the big news of the week, of course. So a couple days ago, there was a little teaser trailer that was dropped with a bunch of wild stuff, and we were really confused on what they were talking about. But we did get it revealed to us on Thursday morning, I believe, the 31st of July, and it was a new action figure from Mcfarlane Toys, and we have the Rippaverse Primeval toy line, and this toy line is starting with a 7-inch scale Ultra Articulation action figure from the Rippaverse being made by Mcfarlane Toys. Of course, Mcfarlane Toys also made the Yaira statue. It's a really nice statue. I've shown it off before, but this is an action figure, so $40 on the site. Of course, I believe the one with the certificate of authenticity is $80. You can buy both for $112, which is what I opted for. It's also coming with an exclusive Dokuman card, which it just shows the rectangle with a question mark, so there's no point in me printing out that. But there is a lenticular Dokuman trading card in the format of all the ones that I've shown off before. So that'll be really interesting to see. I have ordered two. I'm going to give one of those away, keep one for myself, as I like to do, because I'm a collector of Dokuman's archives. But this is a really cool action figure, 22 moving parts, 2 exchangeable heads, 6 extra hands, and a base, and a 5-panel display box. And this is to show off the box here. So of course you got the Isom logo, you got the Mcfarlane Toys logo, you got Rippaverse Primeval, this is Isom, and then you've got a drawing from Kanan White. So really nice art there. And then we've also got, if I can show off, this is what the panel box is going to look like, and it's not necessarily the best picture to look at, but you do, because I had to blow it up a little bit, but you see you've got Isom in the box there, you've got the front cover, you've got the articulating head and all the parts there in the box. So it's a nice panel display box, and of course Isom cover A is what's being shown off as when you flip the interior. So a really cool box design, if I do say so myself. And then we've got a blow up of what the figure itself looks like in more detail. Of course, you can see fully articulating. So it's a classic action figure, which is really cool. Action figures are something that people were really asking for with comics. And I think Mcfarlane Toys, they are the people to work with if you want to make action figures or any sort of collectible. I was talking about this on the live stream I did yesterday. Filming this is Saturday. And that people just love the action figures. Mcfarlane Toys is the one to do it. They do Marvel, DC on their site, and like Game of Thrones. They do statues of like hockey players and stuff and UFC players and stuff like that. So basically, anybody who wants a collectible or whether it's a statue or an action figure, Mcfarlane Toys is who you go to. So the fact that they're working with the Rippaverse on an ongoing basis, it seems, is really interesting. It's going to be really interesting to see what comes next from the Primeval toy line. I definitely think the Primeval toy line will bring back, I think this is the best one to show off. With the Primeval toy line, I think keeping this one that's being launched as a limited one makes a lot of sense. But if you can remove some of this stuff, like have only one exchangeable head, remove the base, you only have maybe one extra pair of hands, and get that down to either $29.99 or $19.99, and do a run of like 10 to 15,000 and distribute them in local comic book shops, in Walmart, Target. Bundle them with Isom #1 or an issue of the Rippaverse, and you can get people to impulse buy them, get the comic, and get them into the Rippaverse. I think that's a really long-term aspiration for really expanding the readership of the Rippaverse and really making it a brand that exists outside of the online niche, even though it's a decently sized niche. Of course, consistently, the books are making 5 to 6 figures, and of course, they've had, 4 campaigns that have made over $1 million from Isom 1 and 2. Giant Road 1 and Alpha Core 1 all passed the 7-figure mark. So there definitely is a decently sized audience for the Rippaverse, but it can always be expanded. Cons are certainly an avenue for this, but I think this Primeval toy line, you bundle them with the comics like Mcfarlane Toys did in the past with Spawn when they first launched back in the 90s, before I was around. That would definitely be the way to get a whole new readership into reading Rippaverse comics. And of course, I think it would be a good way just to even more legitimize the brand if you had this, if you were wholesaling these to retail. But I think having this as like a exclusive one that's being sold through the Rippaverse site, and then basically removing some of the extra stuff. Like I said, you don't necessarily need the base, you don't need the other exchangeable head, you don't need all 6 extra hands, maybe just 1 pair of extra hands, and you can have a simpler display box. And you can do a print of like 10 to 15,000 of these, or a manufacturer run of 10 to 15,000 of these, and get them in wholesale. Like I said, Walmart, Target, local comic book shops. I was drinking Toys R Us on the stream last night, but Toys R Us doesn't exist for. If it did, it would be nice. But anyway, that's really where I'm thinking the future of Primeval toy line really ought to be, is getting these into physical stores, bundled with comic books or the issues of the Rippaverse, or maybe even both, like Isom 1 and Rippaverse #1, for that, if the dollars make sense, and then getting those be impulse bought at the $29.99 or $19.99 if they have the means to make a profit off of either one of those margins. But I think $29.99 would be probably easier to make money off of. But $19.99 would be really good as an impulse buy. But I'll have to see how that works out. But I think getting these into stores with comic books, bundled with comic books, is going to be the way to go, especially for the local comic book shops, because it'd be even easier to bundle with those. And of course, you can have that as a means to distribute all of the comic books to the local comic book shops, which they have sold to retailers before Rippaverse, and I think they do on an ongoing basis. it's not something that most fans typically do, because most fans just buy directly from the Rippaverse site, which is, I think, perfectly okay, and it's where a lot of consumer habits are going, is to buying directly from the company online, D2C. That's the business term for it, but I still think retail has its place, especially for a product like this, especially for the Primeval toy line. I think they can make a lot of, let's say not just money, I think, but they can get a lot of interest in the Rippaverse if they went the retail route. And I definitely think that's something when you're working with Mcfarlane Toys, when you have four multi-million, 4 7-figure campaigns, and you have all this buzz that surrounds the Rippaverse, then I think it's legitimate to start weighing the options of doing retail size runs. I think the coffers are big enough to justify that, and I think, like I said, that's the next big step into legitimizing the brand of the Rippaverse, other than doing longer length animations in video games. I think that's going to be the three-pronged approach, is getting toys in the retail, long form animations, and then video games. But all those things do take a while, and they do take a bit of a big investment up front, because it costs a lot of money to say, hey, we want to buy 10,000 action figures and distribute them across the country. But I think they're getting to the point where it makes more sense to do it than it does to not do it. But I'm not necessarily the accountant, don't necessarily know how much that costs versus how much they have, but it certainly is an interesting thing, and definitely feels a lot more realistic than it did just a couple of days ago, because we do have that action figure now. Definitely going to review it, take one out of the box, fully articulated, show off all of the exchangeable parts and everything, which is really cool that it's coming with. But like I said, you can certainly simplify it to make it less of a collectible and more of a toy, and also cheaper, and get it to be something where parents will buy it for their kids, bundle it with comics, and then boom, you can get readers of the Rippaverse. But that's really all I have for you guys today. It's going to be really exciting to see what else comes from the Rippaverse Primeval toy line. Probably going to get Yaira and Alpha Core next, but who knows what's going to happen with the Primeval toy line. It's definitely something that came a bit out of left field for me, so probably going to see more stuff like that. But it's really cool that there is a toy line. It's really cool that Mcfarlane Toys is the one to do it, because they did a great job on the Yaira statue. But until we get that information, don't have anything else for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. Joker is out.
Thank you for tuning in to the Braxcast. Be sure to like, comment, follow, and subscribe to keep up with the Rippaverse.